I'm here in the lovely colonial town of Ouro Preto, chock full of great Portuguese, Brazilian architecture from the 17th and 18th centuries, and ground zero for the Brazilian gold rush during colonial times. This is my last video from Brazil, and the last video of my multi-country swing through South America. And I must say, it's a bit bittersweet to think about leaving this part of the world. It's nice that I should end up here, though, in such a beautiful, tranquil place, full of history and surrounded by nature. The downside is I really don't want to leave. And as we explore this beautiful city, I think you'll see why. Today, about 70,000 people live in Ouro Preto, many working in jobs related to tourism. But in 1730, and for several decades thereafter, this was the most populous city in South America, with twice the population of New York and 5 times the population of Sao Paulo. As a World Heritage Site, Ouro Preto is largely untouched from the days when it was synonymous with gold, diamonds, and other precious minerals that have been extracted from this rugged countryside. It is said that 800 tons of gold was sent to Portugal in the 18th century alone, and that's just the official tally, not including gold that circulated illegally. The tremendous wealth generated from gold mining here, starting at the end of the 1600s, developed a bit differently than other famous gold rushes, such as those in California or Alaska. This one attracted its share of ruffians, but it also drew the intelligentsia from Europe, including painters, sculptors, composers, poets, and philosophers. One result was the rich Baroque revival architecture that lives on here to this day. There are numerous grand churches that adorn this ruggedly hilly city, and among my favorites architecturally is this one, the Church of St. Francis de Assisi. It was designed by Brazil's greatest sculptor architect of the period, Antonio Francisco Lisboa. Because of a rare condition, he was plagued with deformed fingers and toes and suffered great pain, so much so that he cut off some of his own fingers with a sculpting tool. And yet his work has stood the test of time, and today he's considered among Brazil's great artists. That's one of the things I really appreciate about this town. It's of course old, historic, and it's an ideal draw for tourists and tourists who come here. But of course, it's also a real place, a living city, and you never feel as though you're at a tourist trap here. I can think of colonial towns in other countries that I won't name immediately that have become a bit too defiled, I would say, by tourism, and Ouro Preto is not one of them.
Quase beijo nela, Gabriel. Chega mais pertinho. Isso. Ok, mantenha assim, por favor. Ei.
Whether you want to or not, you're going to get lost in the streets because it's so steep and hilly that you can't really learn the layout of the town in a quick way. These streets are not only steep, they are cobbled stone, and when I say cobblestone, I mean first generation cobblestone. They're very roughly hewn and placed together. There are very few even surfaces. But they didn't have that during the gold rush. Oops, sidewalk ends. In 1789, Ouro Preto became famous for something else. the birthplace of a national independence movement known as the Inconfidencia. The leading figure of that movement, Joaquim José da Silva Javier, better known as Tiradentes, became a Brazilian hero. This fine plaza, which is the closest thing to a town center here, is named in Tiradentes' honor. This was originally a prison, the Ouro Preto House of Chains, where early revolutionaries were imprisoned and tortured. In the 1940s, a Brazilian president decreed that the participants in the Inconfidencia were martyrs. And he had this former prison transformed to be both a museum and a mausoleum where their remains are kept in honor. Another of the wonderful things about Ouro Preto is beautiful parks at various places in the heart of the city, but unless you looked up and saw the large colonial houses at the top of these canyons, you'd never know you were in an urban area. Bom dia. It's like an immediate time out from an urban environment simply by walking down a few steps once you find them and entering into a different ecosystem. This is a highland tropical climate because the city is at about 3,700 feet elevation, which given its distance from the equator makes it a very ideal climate, a delightful place to be and to explore. Gold mining on a commercial scale has long since receded into history here, but there are nonetheless active gold mines in the region, including at least 3 within the city, and I'm headed to one of those. So I'm here in the mine entry area, and as you can see, I've been equipped with a safety helmet. I'm told that the spaces inside are not extremely cramped, that the ceilings are walkable standing up for the most part, so here's hoping for the best as I go down into the earth in this gold mine. Just entered with my guide, Salo, and he was explaining to me that this entry that we just came in and I'm now walking in was constructed completely, of course, by slave labor many years ago. And I can see now where it was necessary to put on a safety helmet because I've already bumped my head twice. Now you walk in these mine shafts today and they're well illuminated because they run tourists through here. But as Salo was explaining to me, every few feet you see dugout areas in the wall. I'll show you one right here. That was for lighting because during the gold era here, there was no electricity. It was strictly candlelight. One of the very interesting things about this mine and other gold mines in this region during the era of gold mining was that dynamite or other kinds of explosives were rarely ever used. In fact, that was not the standard way that laborers extracted the gold from this mine. They used picks to beat on these rocks and separate the ore and then take the the gold out of the ore. The only time explosions were really used was in very small areas, a very deliberate area. Well, there's one fact about the gold that was mined in this mine and others here that speaks to why the city itself was called Ouro Preto. Because Ouro Preto literally means black gold. It was a iron oxide that made it black. If you were looking for something that glistened, you would be looking at iron pyrite or fool's gold, but the gold here was black. Hence, the city that is the icon of this region was called Ouro Preto. It feels good to be back out into the open air. Well, as you can see, there's really a beautiful cityscape from just outside the mine opening on the side of this hill. Of course, 200 years ago, this would have looked very different, but today it's like a choice piece of real estate with a waterfall just below me, trickling down the hillside and out over beyond the trees, just a beautiful colonial landscape of Ouro Preto. You live in a very beautiful city, Salo. Es una ciudad muy linda. Well, I have one more unofficial duty here in Ouro Preto, and that's to see my friend Fatima,
as Our Lady of Fatima.
She's about to run a 12K race.
That's my intention. My intention is run, but I think that I'm gonna walking more than running.
Okay, we'll see. That could very well be if the rudest between here and the nearby town of Mariana, and if it's anything like the steepness here, I think you will be walking some. So we're headed down to the square to see her off. Well, we have made it to Tiradentes Square, and as you can maybe see, the crowd of runners has gathered in their bright yellow t-shirts. Looks like a lot of fit competitors here.
Yeah, I just wanna come because I like as a joke for me, not a joke for I forgot the word.
Pessoal,
that's a time to
vou
enjoy.
chamar todos os atletas
I got you.
para já acontecer nenhum atraso, que nenhum corredor gosta de corrida atrasando.
That's my life, but I'm not staying in the first because I think that the first line as the real runners.
Exactly. Well, have a great time.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Da primeira batida do sino. Ele deve estar ali atrasado ou adiantado.
And there she goes.
Então nós, da organização,
And
já vamos trazer
so will I
todo o
go
processo de
soon.
abertura.
vai tocar, hein?
Seis, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Boa prova, galera! Agradecer a todos aí, já estaremos em Mariana.
Hey! And that's how the 12K starts here, with ambulances in tow. Olá!
Oi! Força, gente. Motivação. Vamos lá.